Rafik never thought much about the way people looked at him when he walked through the narrow streets of the village. He was used to those half-curious, half-pitying gazes that he had seen since he was young. People respected him, yes, but always with a certain distance, as if there was a wall between him and everyone else. He did not know why, and most days he told himself it did not matter. But sometimes late at night, when the house grew quiet and the hum of the ceiling fan filled the room, he wondered if those looks came from something he didn't know about himself. He grew up with his uncle and aunt, who always treated him with basic kindness. They fed him, gave him a place to sleep, and made sure he attended school, but they never acted like he truly belonged to them. There was always a strange formality in their voices when they spoke to him, even when he was a child. As he got older, he sensed there was a story behind that distance, but whenever he tried to ask, his uncle would change the topic and his aunt would suddenly find a reason to leave the room. He eventually stopped asking. Years passed, and life settled into a pattern. He worked odd jobs around the village, helped farmers with heavy tasks, repaired tools for small pay, and lived a quiet life that neither troubled nor impressed anyone. People accepted him, but no one ever got close. Rafik didn't complain. He thought this was simply the way life was meant to be. Then one warm afternoon, everything changed. His uncle had passed away just a week earlier. It was a quiet passing, the kind that did not shock anyone because his uncle had been ill for months. After the funeral, relatives visited, shared condolences, and left. When the house emptied out, only Rafik and his aunt remained. She sat silently on the charpie while he tried to tidy up the yard to distract himself. He didn't know what to say to her. She looked tired and smaller, as if grief had shrunk her body. A few days later, she asked him to clean the old shed behind the house. His uncle used to keep his tools there, along with boxes of things collected over the years. "Take out what you think is still useful," she said softly. "We'll decide the rest later," Rafik nodded, though he wasn't sure what he might find in that dusty little room. The shed had always been closed, and his uncle rarely let anyone inside. It was a cramped space with a tin roof, wooden shelves, and stacks of cardboard boxes. As he opened the creaking door, a wave of dust greeted him, and beams of sunlight fell across old screwdrivers, rope, jars filled with bolts, and a pile of broken farming equipment. He began by moving the larger items aside. Some were too damaged to repair, while others could be sold for a small amount. Then, near the back corner, he spotted a small tin box. It was wedged behind a stack of rusted buckets. He pulled it out, wiped the dust off the lid, and opened it. Inside lay an old tractor key. It wasn't an ordinary key. The metal was rusted, the edges worn, and faint scratches formed a name along the side, his own name. Rafik froze. He ran his thumb over the letters again and again, checking if he had imagined it. But the tiny carvings were real. He sat on an empty wooden crate, staring at the key for a long moment. His mind filled with questions. Why would this be in his uncle's shed? Why did it have his name on it? What tractor was it for? And why had no one ever mentioned it? He stepped out of the shed and walked toward the house. His aunt was sorting some clothes in the courtyard. When she saw the key in his hand, her face changed for a split second. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened just for a moment, but it was enough for Rafik to notice. "Auntie," he said slowly, "do you know what this is?" She looked away, pretending to fold a shirt. "Just an old key. Your uncle kept many useless things. Throw it away. It has my name on it." "Why?" Her hands paused for a second. Then she continued folding, as if she had not heard the question properly. "He wrote names on tools sometimes, so they wouldn't get mixed up with others." Rafik knew she was lying. His uncle never wrote names on tools. He never labeled anything. Everything in that shed was random and unmarked. Did this key belong to a tractor? He pressed. She swallowed hard. "I don't know, Rafik. Let it go. Some things are better left in the past." He had heard that line many times, in different forms, from different people. It was always the same whenever he asked about anything before his childhood. Everyone around him suddenly believed silence was the best choice, but for the first time he felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was the grief of his uncle's passing, Or maybe it was the shock of seeing his own name carved into a forgotten key. Whatever it was, he felt a strong pull to uncover the truth. That night, he lay awake, staring up at the ceiling. The tractor key rested on the small table beside him. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Who had carved his name into it? His uncle? His parents? Someone else? And why would anyone keep it hidden if it was so unimportant? The next morning, after a restless sleep, he took the key and walked through the village. He hoped someone might recognize it, or at least give him a clue. He first approached the blacksmith's shop. The old blacksmith, who had known him since childhood, squinted at the key, but shrugged. "Looks old," he said. "Could belong to one of the tractors from the older farms, but those machines were moved or scrapped years ago." Still, the blacksmith's vague comment gave him something to think about. Older farms. Farms that no longer existed. Lands people no longer talked about. He walked farther, crossing the main street and reaching the shop where farmers often gathered to drink tea and talk. The men sitting outside noticed the key immediately. One of them laughed softly. "Where did you find that, boy?" he asked. "In my uncle's shed," Rafik replied. "Do you know whose tractor this belonged to?" The group exchanged glances, silent for a moment. Then one of them, an elderly man with shaky hands, spoke. "Could be from the old model tractors from the fields near the river. But those were involved in some trouble long ago. No one uses them now." Rafik leaned forward. "What kind of trouble?" But the elderly man shook his head. "Ask your uncle. He knew everything." Rafik stood quietly for a moment, absorbing the sting of those words. His uncle was gone. He could no longer ask him anything. As he walked back home, something within him grew heavier. He didn't know why everyone hesitated to speak. Why was there always half-truths, avoidance, and nervous glances? What could be so terrible or important that people still refused to talk about it after all these years? Later that day, he returned to the shed. He sat on the crate again and held the tractor key in his hand. The metal felt cold even in the warm air. He turned it slowly, studying the edges, the scratches, the faint outline of his name. It felt like a message from a life he never knew. He remembered the one time he had asked his uncle about his parents. His uncle's face had tightened in a way Rafik had never forgotten. "They're gone," he had said quickly. "That's all you need to know. You're with us now, but was that really all?" He looked around the shed again, wondering if maybe there was something else hidden inside. Something that would explain why this key was kept here. He began searching more carefully, lifting old boxes, checking behind shelves, running his fingers along dusty surfaces, but he found nothing. Still, the key felt important, too important to ignore. As evening approached, he walked to the edge of the village, where older farms used to be. The land had changed over the years. Some fields had new owners, some had become empty, and others were covered in wild grass. He tried to imagine his childhood, the days he could barely remember. He tried to picture himself as a little boy, running around somewhere in these fields, maybe watching people work, maybe riding a tractor beside someone he loved. But no matter how hard he tried, the memories did not come. Instead, there was only a blank space. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Someone had tried to erase something from his life. Someone had built that blank space intentionally. He clenched the key tightly in his hand. Whatever this key belonged to, whatever truth it connected to, he wanted to find it. He needed to find it. The day ended with a quiet sky, painted orange and pink. Rafik stood alone on the edge of the old fields, the tractor key in his hand, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: determination. He did not know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. Everyone had lied about his past, and now, finally, he was ready to uncover the truth hidden behind a single, forgotten key. Rafik woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in his chest, the kind that comes when a question keeps knocking inside your mind and refuses to leave. The tractor key lay on the small table beside his bed, catching a bit of morning sunlight through the window. He stared at it for a long time, as if it might suddenly speak and tell him everything he needed to know. But of course it didn't. It was just a silent piece of rusted metal, holding secrets he had yet to understand. He washed his face, changed his clothes, and stepped outside. The village was slowly waking up. A few kids ran past him, laughing. A milk seller cycled down the street, ringing a small bell, and women swept dust from their courtyards. Life looked normal, but inside him, everything felt different. Since he had found the key, it was as if a door had opened in his mind, a door he didn't know existed. After a quick breakfast, decided to visit the older part of the village again, the side where farms once stood, before new houses replaced most of the fields. He had a feeling that the answer lay somewhere in that direction. The old blacksmith's comment kept echoing in his mind. Tractors from older farms. Maybe someone there still remembered something. The walk was long, and the sun was climbing higher, but he didn't mind. He stopped near a small tea stall at the edge of the village. The owner, a kind man with a calm voice, greeted him warmly. Rafik ordered tea and sat on a wooden bench. "Baba," Rafik said gently, hoping the man might know something. "Do you remember the tractors people used on the old farms? The ones that were near the river?" The tea seller paused while pouring tea. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at Rafik with a searching expression. "Why do you ask?" Rafik took the key out of his pocket and placed it on the table between them. "I found this in my uncle's shed." The man leaned closer, examining the old piece of metal. A strange silence settled between them, the kind that suggests someone is thinking about the past. "This is not just any key," he finally said. "This looks like the key from one of the tractors on the Malakadin farms. They were very famous once." Rafik's heart beat faster. "What happened to those farms?" The tea seller sighed. "They were closed down years ago. After some problem, something serious. People stopped talking about it." Rafik leaned forward. "Do you know anything about what happened?" The man shook his head slowly. "Stories fade, my boy. But some stories fade because people want them to." Before Rafik could ask more, a customer arrived, and the tea seller moved away to attend to him. The conversation was over. But the little he'd heard only fueled Rafik's curiosity further. He thanked the man and continued walking until he reached the boundary, where farmland used to stretch wide. The fields were different, now some abandoned, some divided into plots, and some still holding on to old memories. He looked at the tall grass swaying gently in the wind and wondered if his childhood footsteps were hidden somewhere beneath it. As he walked deeper into the open land, he spotted a small tin house with smoke rising from its chimney. Outside sat an old man sharpening a sickle. His back was curved and his hair was white, but his eyes looked alert. Rafik approached respectfully. "Assalamu alaikum, Baba." The old man nodded without looking up. "Walaikum assalam." "I'm looking for some information," Rafik began carefully, "about the tractors that were used in this area long ago." This time the old man paused. He slowly lifted his head and studied Rafik's face, as if trying to recognize him. "Which tractor?" the old man asked. Rafik took out the key. The old man's eyes widened ever so slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Where did you find this?" he asked in a low voice. "In my uncle's shed," Rafik replied. "Do you know whose tractor this belonged to?" The man leaned back, looking troubled. "But I don't know if I should be the one to talk." Rafik's throat tightened. "Please. If this key has anything to do with my past, I want to know." There was a long silence. The old man's hands trembled slightly as he placed the sickle on the ground. "Your face. You look so much like him," he murmured. Rafik frowned. "Like who?" The man exhaled deeply. "The man who used to drive that tractor." Rafik's heart skipped a beat. "You mean my father?" The old man looked at him closely. "Yes, I believe so." Strange mixture of hope and fear washed over Rafik. "Do you know him?" he whispered. The old man nodded slowly. "Not just know him. I worked with him. He was a good man. One of the best." Those words hit Rafik harder than he expected. All his life, people had either avoided talking about his father or spoken vaguely, as if there was nothing worth remembering. Hearing someone finally speak positively about him felt overwhelming. "What happened to him?" Rafik asked. The old man looked down, his voice soft and shaky. There was trouble. Something to do with land? Your father tried to help people. He stood up against some powerful men. After that, things changed. People grew scared. Many stayed silent. Rafik felt the wind around him grow still. Why did no one tell me? The old man gave a sad smile. Because fear silences more people than danger. Your uncle probably wanted to protect you. Or maybe he just didn't want to get involved again. Rafik looked away, struggling with the weight of the moment. All these years he believed his past was simple, unremarkable. But now, it felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. Do you know where the tractor is now? He asked. The old man pointed toward a cluster of old trees on the far side of the land. I think it's still there, abandoned. No one touches it anymore. Rafik thanked him and walked in the direction he was shown. His steps were shaky, but his determination grew stronger. If the tractor still existed, maybe it held more clues. Maybe it contained memories he had lost. After walking for several minutes, he reached a clearing where the trees stood tall. And there, half covered in vines and dust, stood an old tractor. Its paint had faded, the tires were cracked, and rust had eaten its body. But it still carried an air of importance. Rafik approached it slowly.
Almost as if he was afraid it might disappear if he moved too fast.
The tractor felt familiar in a strange way, though he had never seen it before, at least not in his memory. He took the key out of his pocket. His fingers trembled slightly as he slid it toward the walled ignition slot. The key fit perfectly. A wave of emotion rushed through him. His throat tightened, and for a moment, he closed his eyes. This wasn't just a tractor. This was a piece of his past, a piece someone had tried to hide from him. He climbed onto the seat, brushing away layers of dust. Birds chirped quietly in the trees as if watching him uncover a buried secret. Something caught his eye. A small metal box wedged under the seat. He reached down, pulled it out, and opened it. Inside was a torn photograph. He stared at it, breathless. The photo showed a young boy, him standing beside a man whose face he didn't recognize. The man had a warm smile and a hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. Rafik's hand shook. His eyes burned. This was his father. He felt a lump rise in his throat. For years, he searched for even a single memory, a single picture, a single face. And now, this forgotten tractor had given him what his entire family had refused to give. He held the photo close to his chest for a moment. Unable to speak behind him, a soft breeze rustled the leaves, almost as if nature itself was comforting him. He climbed down slowly, still staring at the photograph. The tractor key dangled from his fingers. Shining faintly in the sunlight, he finally whispered to himself, I'm going to find out everything. And as he stood there, surrounded by forgotten land and silent memories, he made a quiet promise. He would uncover the truth, every part of it, no matter who had tried to hide it, no matter how long it had been buried. The tractor had given him the first real clue, and he was ready for whatever came next. Rafik walked back home, from the abandoned field with the photograph tucked safely in his shirt pocket and the tractor key held tightly in his hand. The sky above him had shifted to a soft, warm shade, the kind that comes right before sunset. But he barely noticed the beauty around him. His mind was running too fast, filled with questions he had buried for years and answers that were suddenly beginning to show themselves. When he reached the house, his aunt was sitting on the sharp eye in the courtyard, sorting dried chilies. The moment she saw him, she looked up as if she had been waiting. Her eyes scanned his face, searching for something she feared he had discovered. You're late, she said quietly, though her voice held more concern than anger. Rafik didn't respond right away. He removed the photograph from his pocket and held it out. Auntie, who is this man? Her hands froze. The dried chilies slipped from her fingers and scattered across the floor. She stared at the photograph for a long time without touching it. Where did you find this? She whispered. In the tractor, Rafik said. The tractor near the old farms? The tractor that belonged to my father? Her eyes widened. Her breath grew uneven. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to speak. But then she closed her mouth and shook her head. Auntie, please, he pleaded. I need to know. I have been in the dark for too long. Why does no one tell me anything? She looked away, wiping her eyes with the corner of her dupatta. Your uncle always said you were better off not knowing. That some truths do not bring peace. They only bring pain. Rafik stepped closer. But hiding the truth has brought me pain too. I don't want to live with guesses anymore. She finally took the photograph from his hand. Her fingers trembled as she looked at it. This is your father, she said softly. A good man. A very good man. But life wasn't kind to him. Rafik swallowed hard. What happened? Her voice broke slightly. There were people who didn't like how honest he was. He stood up for farmers who were being mistreated. He spoke against the wrong people. And when he refused to stay silent, everything changed. Who were those people? Rafik asked. She shook her head quickly. I cannot say their names. Not even now. They were powerful. They still are. Your uncle didn't want to get involved again. He told me to stay quiet for your safety. Rafik felt a storm rising inside him. But why keep it from me? I had a right to know.
How?
She wiped another tear. Maybe, but your uncle believed he was protecting you. Rafik didn't know how to respond. He felt grateful for the care they had given him. But hurt by the silence that had shaped his whole life, his aunt looked at him with tired eyes. There is someone who knows everything. Someone who is closer to your father than anyone else. Apart from your mother, Rafik's heart skipped. Who? She hesitated. The old mechanic who lived near the river. Your father trusted him with everything. He might still remember what happened. Rafik nodded slowly. This was the second time someone mentioned the mechanic. The old man he had met earlier was most likely the same person, and if he knew more, Rafik needed to hear it. He thanked his aunt and left the house, moving with urgency. The sun had nearly set by the time he reached the old mechanic's small home again. This time, the man was sitting outside drinking tea with a chipped cup in his hand. When he saw Rafik approaching, he didn't look surprised, almost as if he had been expecting him. Did you find the tractor? The old man asked calmly. Yes, Rafik said, and I found a photograph inside it. The old man nodded slowly. Then you are ready to know the full story. Rafik sat down on the wooden stool beside him. His heart pounding, the mechanic took a long sip of tea and began. Your father was not just a tractor driver, he said. He was someone who believed in fairness. He saw how farmers, especially the poorer ones, were struggling. They were losing their land to people who had money, influence, and greed. Your father couldn't stay silent. Rafik listened carefully, his eyes fixed on the old man. One year, the mechanic continued. There were rumors that a large patch of land near the river was being taken unfairly. The families who worked that land for generations were being pushed out. Your father stepped forward to help them. He collected proof documents, signatures, statements. He even spoke to officials in the city. Rafik felt his chest tighten. Is that why he was targeted? The old man nodded. Yes. The people he stood against were powerful. They didn't want anyone challenging them. They threatened him many times, but he didn't back down. What happened after that? Rafik asked, though a part of him feared the answer. One night the old man whispered, Your father disappeared. Just like that. People said many things. Some said he left the village. Others said he was forced out. But I believe something worse happened. Rafik felt a cold shiver. Did anyone investigate? No, the mechanic said, shaking his head. Your uncle wanted to fight, but he had you to protect. He was scared. There was pressure from powerful sides. So he took you in and stayed silent? Rafik felt a deep ache in his heart, an ache for a father he never truly knew, a life that had been kept hidden from him. Your father left behind a lot of evidence, the old man said quietly. He kept some of it in that tractor. The rest, I don't know. Rafik thought about the old tractor, sitting abandoned in the field like a forgotten witness to a story no one dared to tell. Why didn't anyone tell me about all this? Rafik asked. The old man looked at him with sad eyes. Because fear changes people. And because some truths are dangerous. Rafik clenched his hands. I want to find out everything he left behind. I want to know why he was silenced. The old man studied Rafik for a moment, then nodded. There is one more place you should check. The spot near the old river bank. Your father used to go there often. He might have left something hidden. Rafik stood up, determination shining in his eyes. Thank you, Baba. Be careful, the old man warned softly. There are still people who don't want the past uncovered. Rafik nodded and began the walk toward the river bank. The path was long and slightly overgrown, but he followed it with steady steps. Night had almost taken over the sky, but a faint glow of evening light guided him. When he reached the river bank, everything was quiet except for the sound of flowing water. He looked around, searching for anything unusual. Then he spotted a cluster of stones arranged in an odd way, as if someone had placed them there. Deliberately, he knelt down and moved the stones aside. Beneath them was a small metal box. Half buried in the dirt, his heart raced. He gently pulled it out and brushed the dirt off. The box was old, but still strong. He opened it carefully. Inside were papers, old, yellowed documents, handwritten notes, and even a small notebook. He flipped through the pages. Maps of farmland, lists of names, signatures, dates, a detailed account of how land was forcibly taken from farmers. Records his father had gathered. Then he found a page with his own name. It's written in his father's handwriting. His throat tightened. The note was short, but powerful. For my son. One day, you will look for the truth. And when you do, these papers will be your guide. Do not be afraid. Stand for what is right. Tears blurred Rafik's vision. He pressed the note to his chest. Overwhelmed by the love of a man he barely remembered, he closed the box gently and held it tightly in his arms. The tractor key, the photograph, the old mechanic's words they had, all led him here. To the truth buried under stones in silence, he stood up. Looking at the river flowing quietly under the night sky, the cool breeze brushed past him, almost like a blessing. He whispered softly, "I won't let your fight go to waste." He walked back home, carrying not just a metal box, but a piece of his father's courage. The truth had begun to surface. And now, he knew he had no choice but to follow it, no matter where it led. The morning after the long and emotional talk with his uncle, he woke up earlier than usual. His mind felt heavy, yet somehow lighter at the same time. He had carried questions for so many years that having even a few answers made him breathe differently. But he also knew the road ahead was not finished. The tractor key in his pocket reminded him that there was still more waiting for him somewhere, and he had to keep moving forward. He got dressed quietly and stepped outside. The air was cooler than the previous day, a soft wind moving through the small fields behind the house. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the silence settle his thoughts. His uncle came out a few minutes later, rubbing his arms to warm himself, and gave him a small nod. The kind of nod that said, "I know you're not done yet." They didn't exchange many words. Instead, they shared a simple breakfast and prepared to leave again. This time, his uncle suggested they go to the old repair shop near the edge of town. It was a place that hadn't changed in years' dusty shelves. Metal parts scattered in corners, and the same old man sitting behind the counter. Reading a newspaper, like always, the old man looked up when they entered, his eyes hovering on the younger one for a long moment. There was recognition in his expression, but he didn't speak right away. Instead, he folded his newspaper carefully, placed it on the counter, and leaned forward. "It's been a long time since I saw someone with your face," the old man finally said. "You look like a man who used to come here years ago. A man who never talked much but always seemed troubled." He felt a strange shiver travel down his spine. His uncle stepped forward and placed the tractor key gently on the wooden counter. The old man stared at it for a few seconds, as if the small object carried 1,000 memories. "You found this, did you?" the old man asked softly. He nodded. The old man sighed, stood up slowly, and walked toward a dusty shelf hidden behind a row of metal tools. He rummaged through a few boxes before pulling out a small tin container. He brought it back to the counter, opened it carefully, revealed a few old photographs. "Your father left these here," the old man said. "Said he might return one day to pick them up, but he never did." His heart began pounding. He picked up the photographs with trembling hands. In one picture, his father was standing next to a broken tractor, smiling slightly, as if trying to hide his worries. Another photo showed him with a group of workers, dirt on their clothes and exhaustion on their faces. In the last photo, his father was sitting on the same porch the young man had visited just the day before. But something was different in the older man's eyes. In those photos, his father didn't look like the cold, distant man that people had described to him all his life. He looked warm. Tired but warm. Someone who cared. Someone who had a story nobody ever bothered to explain. The old man then told a quiet, slow story about how his father used to help people in the area. He was often misunderstood because he didn't talk much. When rumors began spreading about him, rumors that painted him as a troublemaker, he didn't defend himself. He simply kept working, fixing tractors, repairing tools, offering help when he could. But as the rumors grew, people slowly began to distance themselves from him. He was a good man, the old man said plainly. Just not a loud man. And people sometimes mistake silence for guilt. He felt anger rise in his chest, but it wasn't directed at any one person. It was anger at the years lost, the misunderstandings, the lies, and the stories others had spoken so confidently without ever knowing the truth. His uncle placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. They left the repair shop with the photographs and the tin container. The ride back toward his uncle's house felt heavier, but in a meaningful way. He was beginning to see his father as a real person, rather than a shadow defined by the town's whispers. Later that afternoon, his uncle told him that there was still one more person he should talk to, a woman who lived near the old fields on the outskirts. She had known his father better than most, though she preferred to stay away from the town. She disliked gossip, his uncle explained, and she had never been part of it. He agreed to meet her, though a small part of him worried about what new truths he might uncover. The road to her small cottage was rough and scattered with stones. When he finally reached the place, he found her tending to a small garden. She looked up at him with calm eyes, as though she had been expecting him. "You look like him," she said before he even introduced himself. "Your father used to walk down that same path when he needed a quiet moment." They sat outside on 2 wooden chairs. The air smelled of fresh soil and leaves. She spoke slowly, the gentle voice that carried weight. She told him about the day his father found the old tractor, the one connected to the key he now carried. It had belonged to a man who had left town abruptly. Everyone assumed the tractor was worthless, but his father restored it piece by piece. He didn't do it for money. He did it because he believed everything broken deserved a chance to work again. That's the kind of man he was, she said softly. He fixed people the same way, quietly, patiently. Her words sank deep into him. He had spent years believing a picture that others painted, a picture that was incomplete and unfair. But now, through these fragments of truth, he was beginning to understand his father's real nature. Before he left, the woman handed him a folded piece of paper. "He wrote this," she said, "but he never had the courage to give it to you." He opened it with care. Inside was a short letter written in his father's handwriting. The words were simple, almost hesitant, but full of emotion. His father apologized for the distance between them and wrote about wanting to come back home once he felt he had rebuilt his life. He spoke of regret, hope, and love things the young man had never expected to read. Tears blurred his vision. He folded the letter carefully and thanked the woman. On his way back, he walked slowly, taking in every detail of the landscape. The world around him felt different now, as if he were seeing it for the first time. That evening, back at his uncle's house, he sat alone on the porch. The sky was turning orange and pink, and the fields were glowing softly in the fading light. He held the letter and the photographs in his hands, feeling the weight of truth settle inside him. He realized now that the stories he had heard about his father were incomplete at best and cruel at worst. People had filled the silence with their own versions, creating a past that wasn't real. But the tractor key had unlocked more than just old memories. It had opened a door to understanding. As he sat there, he knew one thing clearly. He wasn't done yet. There was still one last piece of the story missing, and he was finally ready to find it. He woke up the next morning with a different kind of feeling in his chest. It was not the usual heaviness he had carried for so long. It was something calmer, something steady, almost like the quiet after a storm. The letter from his father lay on the table beside him, its folded edges worn from how many times he had opened it the night before. His uncle was already up, sitting at the small kitchen table with a cup of tea. He looked at the young man with a softness that came from understanding many things without needing to talk about them. "You didn't sleep much," his uncle said quietly. He nodded. "I had a lot to think about." His uncle didn't push him for details. Instead, he poured another cup of tea and slid it toward him. They sat in silence for a few minutes before the young man finally spoke. "I think I need to see the last place he worked," he said. "I want to know everything. Not the stories people made up. The real places he stood. The real things he touched." His uncle gave a small nod. "I was waiting for you to say that." The old workshop where his father had spent his last months was far from town. A place most people didn't bother visiting anymore. It had once been a busy area where farmers brought their broken tools and old tractors, hoping someone could fix them. But times changed. Machines became newer. People wanted faster work, cheaper repairs. Slowly, the workshop became forgotten. The drive there was long and quiet. Dust rose behind their truck as the road turned from concrete to gravel and finally to dirt. When they reached the workshop, the building looked tired, like it had been standing on memories instead of strength. The wooden walls were faded, and the metal roof carried patches of rust. He got out of the truck and stood still for a moment. The wind blew gently, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and old metal. This was the place where his father had spent hours alone, fixing machines that people no longer cared about. He took slow steps toward the entrance. Inside, the air smelled like oil, metal, and dust. Tools still hung on rusty nails. A broken tractor sat in the corner with its hood open, as if waiting for hands that would never return. His uncle stayed near the door. Giving him space, he walked deeper inside, running his fingers along the wooden workbench. It was covered in scratches, stains, and mark signs of years of work. He imagined his father standing there late at night, trying to fix something even when everyone else had gone home. Then he saw it, a small wooden box, tucked under a pile of old cloth. He pulled it out slowly. The box was simple, hand-carved, and worn from being opened many times. Inside, there were a few small items: a tiny metal gear, a folded piece of cloth, a rusted bolt, and at the very bottom, a second key. It looked almost identical to the tractor key he had carried for so long. For a moment, he didn't move. His fingers tightened around the small key. His uncle approached, curious. "That key," his uncle whispered. "I've never seen that one before." He didn't know what to say. But something inside him knew this was important. It felt like the final piece his father had left behind. He searched the workshop slowly, looking at every corner, every shelf, every drawer. And then, near the back wall, hidden behind an old wooden board, he found something else. A small notebook. His heart thumped. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside were pages filled with his father's handwriting, notes about repairs, dates, simple reminders. And then something unexpected, pages where his father had written thoughts. Not instructions, not mechanical notes, but feelings. He wrote about loneliness, about trying to rebuild himself after being blamed for things he didn't do. He wrote about the pain of losing respect from people who once depended on him. And in almost every entry, he wrote about his son. He read one part silently, his eyes moving slowly across the words. "I hope one day he knows the truth. I hope one day he understands I left not because I didn't love him, but because I was trying to become someone he could be proud of. I fix broken things for a living, but I never learned how to fix the distance between us. Maybe he will forgive me." His throat tightened. He closed the notebook gently, not wanting to damage the pages. His uncle walked closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. "He loved you," his uncle said simply. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "I know," he whispered. They spent some time cleaning the workshop, not because they had to, but because it felt right. It felt like giving respect to someone who had worked hard in silence. As the sun began dipping lower, Casting warm shadows across the floor, he stepped outside and looked at the fields stretching beyond the workshop. The land was wide, empty, peaceful. He felt something release inside him, a quiet acceptance. His father had never been the man people described. He had been a man who worked hard, who tried to rebuild himself, who made mistakes, but also tried to fix them. And now the young man finally knew the truth, as he locked the workshop door for the last time. He held both keys in his hand, the original tractor key and the second one from the wooden box. He didn't know exactly what the second key unlocked, but he felt certain it had been left for him to find eventually on the way back. His uncle drove while he stared out the window, thinking about everything he had discovered. The lies people told about his father no longer mattered. The truth was stronger. When they reached home, evening had fully settled in. The sky was dark blue, sprinkled with early stars. He sat on the front steps, the keys resting on his palm. His uncle sat beside him. So his uncle said softly, "What now?" He thought for a long moment. "I'm going to rebuild that tractor," he said finally. "The one he worked on. The one these keys belong to." His uncle gave a slow smile. "Then you're finishing what he started." He nodded. "Not just that. I want to rebuild everything, my understanding of him, my connection to him. I can't change the past, but I can honor the part of him people never saw." The next morning, he returned to the workshop with tools, wood, and determination. His uncle joined him, and soon the quiet old building was filled with the sound of work metal clinking, wood shifting, bolts tightening. Piece by piece, the tractor began to look whole again. Days passed. The sun rose and set countless times. The work was slow, but honest. And as he worked, he felt closer to his father, not because of stories, but because of the shared effort, the shared patience, the shared belief that broken things deserved a second chance. When the tractor was finally ready, he inserted the first key. The engine coughed, shook, and then after a long breath came to life. He stepped back, tears forming in his eyes. His uncle clapped him on the back. "That sound," his uncle said with emotion, "is the sound of truth." He nodded, listening to the engine rumble. It felt like a heartbeat from the past, steady and warm. He knew, standing there in the dusty workshop, that everything had come full circle. Not because someone told him the story, but because he found it himself. Everyone had lied about his father's past, but the tractor, key small, ordinary, overlooked, had led him straight to the truth, and for the first time in his life, he felt whole. He shut off the engine, wiped the oil from his hands, and looked around the workshop, now filled not with silence, but with memories he finally understood. The truth, once hidden behind rumors, was now clear. He stepped outside, breathed in the fresh air, and felt ready for his own future. Future built not on lies, but on truth, and on the quiet strength his father had left behind. The morning after the tractor finally came to life, he woke up with a different kind of energy running through him. It was not excitement exactly, and not relief either. It was something deeper, something steady, like a quiet confidence that had been waiting inside him for years. The sound of the engine still echoed in his memory, reminding him of the connection he had rebuilt piece by piece. His uncle was already outside, checking the tools they had used the day before. The old man gave him a warm smile when he stepped out. "You slept well for the first time in days," his uncle said. He nodded. "I did." There was something new in his voice, something calm. They shared a simple breakfast before heading back to the workshop. The air was cool, and thin layers of morning fog brushed against the fields as they drove. The road, once heavy with uncertainty, now felt familiar and almost comforting. When they reached the workshop, the tractor sat in the open doorway, sunlight falling gently across its newly restored frame. It looked different from before, not because of the repairs, but because of what it represented now. It was no longer just a machine his father had once worked on. It was a bridge between truth and misunderstanding. Between father and son, he walked around the tractor slowly, touching the metal, feeling the strength of every bolt, every piece he had tightened with his own hands. His uncle watched him quietly, letting him have the moment. After a while, his uncle spoke. "You know," he said, "your father used to talk to that machine like it was alive. Said it taught him patience." He smiled, imagining his father working late at night, tools scattered around him. Talking to the stubborn engine as if it were an old friend, he climbed into the seat and looked out across the wide, empty land beyond the workshop. The wind brushed against his face, and for a brief second, it felt like his father was sitting beside him. His uncle walked closer. "There's something you should know," he said softly. The young man turned toward him. "I didn't tell you earlier because I wanted you to find your own truth first," his uncle continued. "But there's a place your father visited every week. A place he cared about more than anything. I think you should see it." He nodded slowly, curiosity rising again. It felt like each day brought him closer to something he never knew he needed. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving the workshop behind and following a thin dirt road that wound through empty fields and quiet streams. The further they went, the more peaceful the world became. Finally, his uncle stopped the truck near a small hill. There were no houses nearby, no shops, nothing but the open sky and tall grass moving gently in the wind. "Climb up," his uncle said. "You'll understand when you reach the top." He walked up the hill alone, the grass brushing against his legs. At the top, he stopped. There, in the center of the hill, stood a single wooden bench. Next to it was a tri-small, young but growing. He walked closer. And that's when he saw the small, metal plaque at the base of the tree. It had his name on it, along with the date of his birth. His breath caught. His father had planted the tree. He kneeled beside it, touching the fresh bark with gentle fingers. The wood was smooth, warm under the sun. His uncle reached the top of the hill a moment later. Breathing heavily from the climb, he planted that tree the day he left town, his uncle said softly. Said he wanted something in the world that would keep growing even if people misunderstood him. Something that would always remind him of you. The young man stared at the small tree, his throat tightening. All this time, he whispered. He cared. More than anyone knew, his uncle replied. They sat on the bench together, looking out across the land. The wind blew softly, rustling the young leaves of the tree. His uncle continued, he would come here every week. Sometimes, he watered the tree. Sometimes he just sat and watched it. He said it made him feel close to you, even when life pushed him away. Tears gathered behind the young man's eyes. He didn't hide them. The truth was too big, too deep to keep inside. They sat quietly for a long time. No words were needed. After a while, he took the second key from his pocket, the one he had found inside the wooden box. He had no idea what had opened, but somehow, standing beside the tree, made everything clearer. What if this wasn't for the tractor? He said slowly. What if it was for something else he wanted me to find? His uncle nodded. It's possible. Your father did things with purpose. If he left that key, it meant something. They stood and walked around the hill, searching for anything unusual. An old shed, a buried box, a hidden door in the ground. But the land was clean and open, untouched, except for the tree. Then, something caught his eye. A small wooden post, half buried under tall grass. He walked toward it and brushed away the dirt. There was a tiny hook attached to it, rusted from years of rain and wind, and under the grass, hidden beneath a layer of soil, found a metal hatch. His heart pounded. His uncle stepped back. Try the key. With shaking hands, he inserted the second key into the small lock. It fit perfectly. He turned it. The hatch clicked open. He lifted it, revealing a small compartment built into the ground. Inside were a few old items carefully wrapped in cloth. He lifted the first bundle. Inside was a picture him as a small child, sitting on his father's shoulders. Laughter frozen in time. He didn't remember that moment. But the joy in the picture told its own story. The second item was a small wooden carving of a tractor, carved by hand with uneven lines and rough edges, but the detail in it showed care and patience. The last item was a sealed envelope. His name was written on it. He sat down on the bench before opening it. His uncle stood nearby, but didn't interrupt. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was another letter. Son, if you are reading this, it means you found the truth I could not say out loud. I was not a brave man with words. I struggled to explain myself. I struggled to fix the things that were inside my heart. I left because I thought distance would make me stronger. I left because I wanted to return as a better father. But life does not always give us the time we hope for. If the world ever makes you believe I did not love you, come here. Stand under this sky. Sit by this tree. Look at the land I chose to watch grow with you. The truth is simple. I never stopped caring. I left you keys because I hoped they would lead you back not to machines, but to understanding. You are the best part of my life. Always your father. When he finished reading, the paper shook in his hands. Tears fell, not from sadness, but from a deep warmth that filled his heart. His uncle sat beside him quietly. He wanted you to know. His uncle whispered. The young man nodded, wiping his face. I do now. They closed the hatch gently and covered it again, leaving everything as his father had intended. As they walked back down the hill, he looked once more at the tree, a symbol of patience, growth, and silent love. He understood something clearly. Now, the past didn't need to hurt anymore. The lies people told didn't matter. The truth was in the small things his father left behind, in the restored tractor, in the notebook, in the hidden letter, in the growing tree. And now, it lived in him too. When he reached the bottom of the hill, he felt lighter than ever before. He glanced back only once, not out of loss, but out of gratitude. For the first time in his life, he understood his father fully, and that understanding would guide him forward. Just like the tractor key had guided him to the truth, the evening breeze carried a soft chill. As the hall slowly emptied after the emotional gathering, people moved out in small groups, whispering about everything that had happened. Yet no one seemed able to fully express how deeply they had been affected. And in the middle of it all stood the billionaire, quietly watching the world around him with a calm that felt new to everyone who knew him. For so long, he had been the man whose presence made others straighten their backs and watch their words. Now he looked almost like everyone else, tired, thoughtful, and touched by something real. When he finally stepped outside, he found the young sisters waiting near the entrance. They had stayed back not because they wanted anything from him, but because they wanted to make sure he was all right. The older sister gave him a small, warm nod, and he responded with a gentle smile, something he had rarely shown in public. They walked together toward the quiet corner of the courtyard, where everything had started weeks ago. The lights from the nearby buildings cast a soft glow on the ground, and for a moment, it felt like the world had slowed down for them. The billionaire looked at the spot where he had first met them, two girls who